Hello, this is John from caveofprogramming.com and welcome back to Learn Perl by Doing It. And in this tutorial we're going to look at downloading stuff from the internet, and we're going to look at a really simple way that you can download images and HTML files. So I'm going to use Eclipse this time, and I've installed the Epic Perl plugin as described in the first tutorial in this series, and I'm going to go to File, New, Other, and I'll select Perl Project here and click Next, and I'll give this a name, and let's call it Tutorial 3. That should do the trick. And I'll click Finish, and then I'll right click Project and go to New, Other, and Perl File, click Next, and I'll give this a name and I'll call it main.pl. and it's really important to put the .pl on the end, otherwise you might end up with a file that lacks the Perl nature, I think it's called, which means that it won't format or syntax highlight correctly. So click Finish. So here we've got our Perl file, and I'm going to type use strict semicolon, use warnings semicolon, sub main, open a curly parenthesis and hit return, and Eclipse has put the closing one in for me, and then I'm going to call main by saying main round bracket semicolon. So here we can put code in here, which is the entry point of our program. And I just want to mention a couple of things before we continue, and one is that in Perl you can put brackets on a method declaration like that, but it's optional, so you don't have to. And sometimes there are some advantages to not doing, in fact. And I've noticed that this Perl plugin formats Perl in this style, in the inline bracket style. So if I type it like that, which will be acceptable Perl, and do Control Shift and F to auto format it, it puts the bracket there by default. So I'm going to carry on with that style. And you can also right click and go to, well, I thought you could, source and format, that's it. So that will automatically format your code for you, and it's worth formatting your code automatically a lot, because there's nothing worse than badly formatted code. It's really hard to read. So that's Control Shift and F, or just right click and go to source and format. So I'm going to use a module here called LWP Simple. So I'm going to type use and then LWP, that's, I think it's all uppercase actually, LWP, and 2 colons like that, and then simple, and this is auto completing for me. Let's try to get that to work actually. So I'll type the colons again, and let's look in the list here. So this is going to be the stuff that's installed. I'm going to go to LWP simple, and you finish with a semicolon. So capital LWP and capital S. And if you haven't got that in your system, then you need to, in Windows, as we looked at in the first tutorial, you would, if you type Perl or something like that in your start menu, you can go to this Perl package manager, search for LWP simple and install it. And it's going to be different, presumably, on it's going to be different with different installations of Perl. And if you're using Linux or something like that, then either contact your system administrator or just Google something like installing Perl packages. But you may well have this installed by default because it's a really common package. Actually, I've got some kind of error here. Let's just save it, and yeah, it's gone away, so that's good. And now that we've included LWP simple, we can retrieve a HTML file from the internet very, very simply. So I can type get, that's lowercase, this is a subroutine, get, and open a bracket, and in here I can type the URL of an HTML file that I want to retrieve. So you may know that the internet basically consists of HTML, which is a language that tells what content web pages should actually have. And here we're just going to get initially the text of an HTML page. So I'll type a URL in here. I'll type http://www. And let's use my own site as an example actually. In fact, if I get the URL in Chrome here, www.caveofprogramming.com, and wait for it to load, and I was hoping it would put the HTTP there, but it hasn't. So let's just do Control C to copy that, and I'll go back to Eclipse and I'll just paste this in here. So we've got a complete, oh, it's actually pasted the HTTP even though it didn't appear in the URL bar. So here we've got a full URL, and that actually returns my HTML as a string. So I'm going to just print the string directly by saying print get and the URL, and at the end I need a semicolon. And before I print it, let's say print, and in quotes, downloading ... and then I'll print \n, which is a new line, just to make this appear on a new line. And at the end I'll do the same again. I'll say print double quote finished and \n and a semicolon, and I'll hit save. So now let's run that. So actually I could just run it in Eclipse. I was going to go to the command line, but there's no real need perhaps. So I'll just hit run, and it's going to say hopefully downloading, and then we're going to see the HTML code here of my website. So all this stuff that's coming out here, this is what I had to type, or what WordPress created for me to create my website, the front page of my website. And there's no images in it. This is just purely downloading text. Now supposing you want to store that HTML, you can use something called get store, and the way that works is this. Let's actually what I'll do is I'll comment this out just in case you want to look at it. So I'm going to put this code on caveofprogramming.com, so you'll be able to refer to it. So I'll comment this out, and a comment in Perl is a hash character like that, or I think in America, in the USA, I believe this is called a £, or in the UK we call it a hash character. So I'll comment that out, and then let's use get store. So I'm going to say get store, and again I supply a URL as the first argument, like this, and then I supply after a comma a second argument, which is the name of the file that I want to store to, and this can be a full file path, but I'm just going to put here, let's call it home.html, let's say. So it's going to store it in the current directory, and let's click run like this, and I'll say that yes, I want to save it. So it says downloading and finished, and now let's go to that directory. So I'll open Explorer, and I actually put this program in C tutorial Perl, I know it's here somewhere, I have too much stuff in this directory, projects, and here it is. There's my, here it isn't actually, is that right? Yeah, we should have tutorial 3 in there somewhere. So let's just go back again and double check. Perl tutorial 3, here it is. Okay, so there's the directory, and this is what I set for the workspace directory of Eclipse when I started it up. I told it to put the projects in this directory. So it's created tutorial 3 when I created the project. Here's my main.pl that I'm running, and this is just a text file. And here's the home.html that we just downloaded. And if I click on that to open it, then it's going to open in a browser, and hopefully something's happening. And here we go. This is the file that I downloaded, and you can see images in it just because these images have absolute URLs encoded within the HTML. So when you load that page in your browser, it will go away and fetch any images that have absolute URLs embedded in the HTML. So it looks complete, but it's actually we actually haven't downloaded the images. We've just downloaded the text that creates the structure of this page, which is basically, if you right click, do view page source, this is what we've downloaded, text here. We can also download images by the same technique. So if I look at this logo here, let's say I want to download this, and I right click and I go to, this is going to depend on your browser, but let's try copy image location. And now I'll go back to Eclipse here. So let's look for Eclipse. Here it is. And I'm going to comment this out and now let's say get store, open a round bracket, and I'm going to use a single quote here. I'm going to put a string within single quotes, just because within double quotes special kind of characters in strings will get interpreted, and here I want to, if you use single quotes, you're meaning don't try to interpret this string in any fancy way, it's just literally a string. So I want to say that no matter what weird characters there are in the stuff that I'm about to paste in, I want Perl to interpret it literally as a string. So I use single quotes, and I do Control V, although I think this would work with double quotes anyway, and comma, and now again I'm going to say logo.png, and that's the name of the file that I want to store. And I think there's that film, I think it's called The Social Network, but I'm not sure, about that guy who started Facebook, and if I remember rightly, he uses Perl for downloading images in that film, and Perl is really great for doing that sort of thing. So let's try this, and I'm going to run this, and it says downloading and finished, and it's pretty quick. And now I go to let's go to that directory, and if this doesn't work, it may be that you're using a proxy or something, and it might get a little more complicated, but usually, especially if you're working at home and there's no complicated internet setup in your way, usually this will work. So I'll go to that directory again, and here's the logo, and let's double click it, and there's the logo that I just downloaded. I think it's worth mentioning one last thing in this tutorial, which is that this actually returns a return code. So I can say, and now I'm going to say my dollar, where's the dollar on this Hungarian keyboard I'm using? There's a question. My dollar, I meant to have a space, so my space dollar code equals. And now what this is this is a variable which could hold any single value. It could be a string or a number or anything, and my we're forced to use to say this is the first occurrence of this variable, and we're forced to use my or something like it if we put use strict at the top of the file. And that's a really good thing to do, because if you're not forced to declare the first use of a variable, if you then misspell it later on, then you might not notice and you'll have terrible problems. So you put use strict in, declare all your variables with my, and remember that single value variables have to start with a dollar. So say my dollar code equals get store, and then we can use an if statement, and we can say if dollar code equals, so we're using equals to test if it's equal to something, 200, and 200 is the success code for when you're downloading HTML, and we can say print success \n. Conversely, if it doesn't work, we can say else and print failed, let's say \n. And so now we know whether this get store is going to succeed or not. Let's try that, let's run it, and it's going to say success. But if I change this to a file that doesn't exist by putting a random character on the end and then run it, then it's going to tell me, hopefully, failed, so we know that we didn't download it successfully. That's enough for this tutorial. I hope that's given you a taste of how easy it is to get stuff done in Perl. And as I said, if this doesn't work, you may have problems with a proxy. And do let me know, john@caveofprogramming.com, and maybe we'll look at that in a future tutorial. But that's it for this time, and until next time, happy coding.